Well, welcome back to We Don't Color on the Dog. Last week, we found out that the Attorney General's office was selective in how they handed out emails that you had requested. We have State Rep Alex Andrade with us. You requested them back in April. Thank you for forwarding it to me, answering my records request pretty quickly. It really substantiated a lot of what we've been talking about, don't they?
Yeah, I think probably one of the bigger reasons why they've been sitting on this stuff for so long is it did contradict a lot of the things that James Uthmeyer and Governor DeSantis had been saying since the beginning. One, it confirmed, triply confirmed, that Centene had been begging the state to settle for $67 million since like 2021, 2022. But when DeSantis came out and said, we struck a great deal earlier this year when the Hope Florida stuff became public, his statements that we struck a great deal and this $10 million was a cherry on top or an addition to completely contradicts his statements there. And it also, for the first time, draws a direct nexus between the governor's office and this concept of sending money to Hope Florida. Now, I have new public records requests out to the executive office of the governor and to ACA, trying to figure out who was part of this meeting at the governor's office where the timing shows it looks like this meeting at the governor's office is where the concept of sending money to Hope Florida originated last September. I've been requesting all drafts of the settlement agreement since April because, again, when you want to try and stay clear-eyed and focused on what are the facts in front of me, I don't want to go too far afield, and impugn someone's character or claim something that I don't have facts to back up. I was hoping that, or at least, allowing for the possibility that the concept of sending money to Hope Florida had been in draft settlement agreements for months and months prior to the actual settlement being executed. To find out that it was forced in there 2 weeks before they actually signed the deal, that again, if it had been added months before, that would have contradicted a lot of what I've been saying happened. But that, again, just confirms it was added at the last minute during a heated political cycle when the governor was obviously desperate to find funds to oppose the medical marijuana amendment on the ballot. This happened in conjunction with all the other circumstances we've seen where the governor's office was pressuring state agencies to use state funds to run ads to oppose the abortion and the marijuana amendment. I don't care if you support or oppose those amendments. I obviously aggressively opposed the abortion amendment. I voted for the marijuana amendment, but I wasn't a huge advocate for it. I thought there were flaws in it. But the fact that the governor felt comfortable weaponizing taxpayer dollars for political campaigns is a concern. And this just seems like the furthest extent they engaged in that practice.
Yeah, in what for the viewers, what happened in this was, and it was pretty clear, and you pointed it out also, is that, and by the way, Politico didn't, is that, they had pretty much the same agreement for 2 to 3 years sitting out there. They were fighting over wordage and things like that, what the releases are, but the dollar amount didn't change. And we have what they had right before the meeting and right after the meeting. The very next day, there's a red line version that puts $5 million to Hope Florida Foundation. And then a couple days later, it's bumped up to $10 million. And
Yeah.
less goes back to the coffers of the state because of this.
And until until James Uthmeyer either comes clean about what happened or he's put under oath by somebody, we won't know for sure. But my running theory about why the Hope Florida amount went from 5 million to 10 is that when you look at the PAC that received this Hope Florida money, when you look at that PAC, on September 12th, they received $1 million from the Florida Chamber of Commerce, not tied to Hope Florida. I'm assuming, I've never received $1 million donation, but I'm assuming that in the days leading up to that wire being executed, you're told by the group sending you $1 million that you're going to get $1 million, right? So prior to September 12th, James thought he had one conduit in the Chamber of Commerce to kind of sneak $5 million through on that end. We see on September 18th, the other dark money group, Save Our Society from Drugs, sent $1 million that was also separate from Hope Florida. Again, same thing. I'm assuming Save Our Society from Drugs let James know, hey, we're about to send you $1 million, right? And I think that's why the number went from 5 to 10, because James realized he had a second conduit to funnel additional funds from Hope Florida to his PAC. Again, Until we hear from these dark money groups who've refused to testify today or from James, we won't know why it went from 5 to 10. But that's my running theory. Right now, I have, like I said, outstanding public records requests to the governor's office and to ACA for like Outlook calendars to at least try and confirm who was present at this September 10th meeting in the governor's office that led to this hope language being added. What we do know is that Centene wanted to make clear they were making this payment like practically with a gun to their heads, and that John Gard wanted nothing to do with this settlement after this Hope Florida stuff got added into it.
Yeah, they wanted to be clear. They wanted no liability if it came back, if the federal government came back and said, you've mishandled the settlement, didn't go back the way it should go. The other thing, and I just thought about this too, Alex, if we look at it, not all of the $5 million went to the PAC. Each one of those nonprofits kept some of it, didn't they?
Well, the Florida Chamber of Commerce, they kept back like 1.5 million.
Which
So
could be a reimbursement of the million that they put in.
it could be. We also know that this Chamber of Commerce 501c4, they sent separate money to RPOF, the Republican Party of Florida, presumably for these campaigns. So they might have done a better job, maybe, of like hiding exactly where this money went.
Right.
But Save Our Society from Drugs, they sent like 4.75 million of the five. As you've mentioned, Rick, there's been a shakeup over at Save Our Society from Drugs with some board members leaving. What I've heard from some board members is that the executive director, Amy Ronshausen, before she was kind of put on leave after all this came to light, she told them that that leftover 250 was earmarked, but she wouldn't explain what that meant. So we still don't know until she comes clean and shares with the public exactly what happened, what it was earmarked for, or what it's been used for since.
Yeah, it was interesting in looking at the different drafts because Centene was the Medicaid provider. It was their pharmacy benefits manager that didn't handle all the discounts properly back to the state, which is a national problem. But you could see in the sides, Centene saying, "We really are confident. We want the attorney. Why is the inspector general not?" Was completely that was upsetting to them, and then they still they wanted the attorney general to sign off on it. And like you said, John Gard is a deputy attorney general. He did his best to keep his name out of it and keep his boss out of it.
Yeah. And I can't help but feel somewhat bad for John Gard. Yeah, he was Ashley Moody's like chief deputy when she was attorney general. He actually served as the interim attorney general before Governor DeSantis appointed James Uthmeyer to the role. He's been nominated by President Trump to serve on the federal bench, a lifetime appointment for the Middle District of Florida, and it appears that his nomination's being held up in the U.S. Senate, potentially linked to some of these revelations related to Hope Florida. You've seen, Senator Scott say that he needs to answer questions about it. I don't believe that necessarily anything that the record shows he did as part of this is a disqualifier for the federal bench, but I think the Senate Judiciary and during his confirmation process, if it ever begins, he should have to answer some questions about what his role was, what he knew, and the entire experience there. On top of that, I made a direct public records request to John Gard via telephone in April, and I just never heard anything back. So, that's something where, you gotta explain, okay, well, what steps did you take to try and comply with the Public Records Act, John? Who in your office was withholding these if you yourself were not making the decision not to produce these records to me?
Yeah, it's one of these stories that until we get transparency, it's not going to ever completely go away. I mean, it's
Yeah.
we don't know if it'll be. Hopefully, there'll be some a grand jury look at this either on the federal or state level that something like that we could get some resolution out of it. But every time we get more records, it really just reinforces what really clearly looks like money laundering. That this was the other thing I want to bring up is in that last agreement they added a whereas that this Hope Florida is part of this because they're going to get more involved in the Medicaid. They had this program that was good. And we know that $10 million never made it to those programs. That whereas never happened.
Well, again, I mean, even ACA was more than comfortable conflating Hope Florida, which is this, system of state employees acting as unlicensed social workers, and the Hope Florida Foundation, which doesn't directly or isn't supposed to directly give money to state employees to be doing this. I mean, the Hope Florida Foundation is separate and distinct from the Hope Florida program, and this ACA settlement agreement, they were comfortable conflating the two to, I guess, try and provide comfort to Centene that this money would be used as a Medicaid purpose. ACA was more than happy to mislead the other signatories to this agreement to make them think this money would be used for a Medicaid purpose. And that's what makes it even more kind of bizarre and disappointing today to see the same guy that drafted those whereas clauses send me a letter back in April saying I was, ridiculous for thinking this was Medicaid money. The same gentleman that gave me this bizarre legal analysis that makes no reference to the FMAP share, the federal assistance share of Medicaid, makes no reference to that to the letter he sent me in April. But he tells me, how dare you think that this is Medicaid money when he's the one drafting the whereas clauses, directly tying it to
Right,
Medicaid.
right.
I think he was pressured by somebody to draft that letter in April. But even he, in his emails to John Gard, when John Gard is raising the same concern I am about shouldn't the federal share that we have to pay the feds back be spelled out, he says, let's trust our finance department. We'll trust our finance department to calculate how much we owe the feds. We know, Rick, based on the financial transactions that we have access to, that the money Centene has already sent the state as part of the settlement, they've been treating the full $67 million amount as Medicaid money. They're paying the feds back the feds portion on the full $67 million settlement. So once Centene makes its final payment, I think next month, ACA has 60 days to fully report the settlement to CMS, the federal Medicaid agency. So after that, I think we'll see some more activity. But yeah, there could be grand juries going on right now at the state and federal level. I wouldn't know. Those are secret. They're confidential. It's illegal. It's a felony to disclose that they're happening. So it's possible those are happening right now. I just couldn't tell you.
Well, it's one of these, when I got into this, in the beginning, it's always the cover up that's almost bigger than the misdeeds. The cover up makes it so much more, and I think that's what we're seeing here. And Alex, I appreciate you staying on top of it. I know that you can handle your own in social media against the bots, but it's one of those stories that because you're involved, we're involved, because I think for this community, we have your position is one that you haven't relented on, and I think we as the state and all need to know it. So so thank you for doing that, and I really appreciate you doing this again.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, we'll end it. We'll be back.
Thanks for watching, and to keep up with what's going on, be sure and subscribe. Just click on the little dog to the right and click the subscribe button. You can also like this video and click on the bell, which will notify you of new content. This really helps the channel grow. We appreciate you.